Well, good morning and welcome to the, please have a seat, the 9th Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum and the first in Washington, D.C. Dr. Sultan, Fred, thank you for your wonderful opening remarks. We have a community here to talk about a critical issue, as you just saw on that clip. AI and energy are inextricably linked, and we have a community that can smash through the bottlenecks in the pursuit of progress. I'm honored to moderate a panel conversation, and it's entitled Think Big and Build Bigger, Financing Energy and Infrastructure in the Technology Age. As Dr. Sultan said, AI is about gigawatts, and I'm joined by a remarkable group of leaders who are driving some of the most important shifts in how we think about energy, innovation, and infrastructure. Her Excellency Mariam Almheiri, Group Chief Executive Officer of 2.0 and Chairman of the International Affairs Office of the Presidential Court of the United Arab Emirates. Welcome. Chris James from here on CJ, out of convenience, because we do have two Chris's on the panel. So Chris James, Founder, Chief Investment Officer, and Chairman of the Board at Engine Number One. Chris Lehane, Chief Policy Officer and Vice President of Global Affairs at OpenAI. And Chase Lochmiller, great to have you all here. Chase is co-founder, Chief Executive Officer, and Chairman of the Board and Directors at Crusoe. As we heard yesterday, Secretary Chris Wright and His Excellency Dr. Sultan hosted a community of executive leaders to discuss the global transformation being driven by artificial intelligence and the strategic choices that are required to align national security and competitiveness, starting with a reliable energy system. In this pivotal moment, the growth curve of AI isn't just steep, it's exponential. And that growth comes with a very real infrastructure and energy demand forecast. So we want to jump into this and have a discussion to really tackle these challenges. And I want to set a baseline. Chris, maybe I can start with you. The UN projects a 25-fold increase in the AI market over the next decade. From OpenAI's perspective, how steep is that adoption curve really going to be, and how do you project compute demand and energy evolving from here? Give us a sense of scale.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. This is an incredible panel, Your Excellency, Chase, who we've gotten to spend some time with, and CJ, who I go back to pre-K with. Our kids went to preschool together, so it's awesome to be up here. And what an audience for this morning, both here in the room and around the world. Fred, thank you for being a great convener, and Dr. Sultan, really over the last 2 days, an incredible set of conversations that you and your team have been really able to put together, and really appreciative of your opening comments. I love the idea of getting the lock out of the gridlock. But let me answer the question. A little bit of context, maybe through the OpenAI perspective on this, and want to be cognizant of being humble on this. When ChatGPT, which by the way is ChatGPT 2.5, there had been earlier versions of it, was released in November 2022, you saw 1 million people join the platform in 5 days. We've grown to today well over 500 million just regular users, fastest platform in the world to 100 million users. But those are a lot of just sort of fancy statistics. What is really underlying this is that this technology is really a productivity-driving technology. There's a variety of reports out there, that indicate what the impact will be on GDP here in the U.S. Those range from a couple points compounding daily, up to double digits compounding annually. Even if you take the lowest end of that, that's trillions of dollars of economics being injected into the economy. And what that really is at the end of the day and the core of this is about creating economic opportunity, economic productivity, critical to the social contract, critical, I think, to successful flourishing democracies. And the way we think about this is, we are building technology that is allowing us to create tools and put tools in everyday people's hands that is creating the ability to scale learning, thinking, creating, and building. And as your video showed, Sam Altman, our CEO co-founder, has talked about the idea that there are two interrelated drivers of what we call this age of intelligence that's going to drive this productivity. One is electrons, energy, which then creates intelligence, creates all of this opportunity. We're actually releasing a report today called Ideas for Powering Democratic AI. And in the report there's a bunch of ideas about how we think about creating access to this so that everyone's able to participate in this. But that only happens if we have the energy. And so we have this concept that infrastructure is destiny. And what that really means is that at the end of the day, we need to have chips, we need to have data, we need to have talent, and most importantly, we need the energy to be able to put it all together. In this country alone, there's a variety of reports from next 4 or 5 years, we're going to need maybe a low end of 40 gigawatts, as was mentioned. That's the city of Pittsburgh or Portland, Oregon, up to close to 100 gigawatts. So just to people to appreciate the scale that we need to be operating on. And so if we're going to really make this accessible, if everyday people are going to be able to benefit from this productivity, if countries are going to be able to benefit from it, from a nation-building perspective, it is ultimately, do we get the infrastructure piece right, and at the core of that is energy.
Well, I'm glad you bring up infrastructure because this isn't just something in the ether. It's not just electrons on a transmission line. And Chase, you're building mega factories at Crusoe, and I wanted to come to you next because I think it's important to think about the infrastructure component of this as well. Chris is talking about 40 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts. My experience here in Washington, D.C. is people are thinking this is the higher end of the range. Are we doing enough, and what's the infrastructure build-out looking like?
Hear me? Sorry.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I was having some mic issues. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. What a wonderful group to convene and discuss. I loved the concept of the twin engines of driving human prosperity with energy and intelligence. That really resonated with me, Dr. Sultan. So thank you so much for those incredible opening remarks. At Crusoe, I mean, to answer your question, I think. From the conversations that we're involved in and kind of what we're seeing, the estimates looking forward, they're big, they're ambitious. People are seeing these large numbers of growth around energy and data center infrastructure. But I do believe that we are going to undershoot this. I think the demand is well in excess of, and just to be clear, I think the demand is well in excess of that. And the reason is we're at this incredibly pivotal moment in human history where for the first time in human history, we're effectively able to manufacture human intelligence, or we're able to manufacture intelligence. Prior to this, we had to do it kind of like the organic, farm grown or, whatever, you'd raise children and sort of teach them things and educate them over many decades. And then they could, be intelligent beings that could contribute productively to society. But now we can manufacture intelligence and create and usher in this new era of abundance that's driven by energy and intelligence. And what's special about that, I think, is number one. I think just kind of in light of some of the conflicts going around the world today. I think it will usher in a new era of abundance but also of peace and prosperity. With abundant energy and abundant intelligence, I think it will just make geopolitical conflicts ease quite dramatically, just because folks will have access to enough. And I think from our perspective, what we're seeing at Crusoe and in great partnerships with folks like OpenAI is that there is a convexity to this overall demand. Where, as the tools get more useful, people use them more. And as they become more cost-effective, the utility of them rises. And sort of, while we're able to manufacture intelligence, the cost of it may be high today. That's going to come down over the course of time as silicon technology gets more efficient, as power becomes more abundant to enable this technology, and the marginal cost of intelligence will shrink dramatically. As that unfolds, demand is going to skyrocket. This is this whole notion of Jevons paradox, where as something becomes cheaper, demand for it, really skyrockets. So, I think we're at a very, very interesting moment of inflection, and Crusoe is excited to help support delivering this new era of abundance of both energy and intelligence.
Well, I want to go to one last element here, CJ, with you before I go to Her Excellency, and that's about conversations we personally had, connecting some of the dots here about the strain that we're seeing with utilities and the power grid in the near term, and frankly even the medium term. You've talked about it being a heavily regulated industry, not set up to move at the pace we need it at, and so as a company founded on breaking down bottlenecks, I want to hear your thoughts on just how you're sizing up the current choke points and the consequences of moving the capital into the sector at pace and scale.
Sure. And again, Atlantic Council, thank you very much for having us. Dr. Sultan, thank you for the idea of bringing excitement back to energy. So if we step back, the energy system is a very linear system. The demand for compute driven by AI is exponential. And the industry set up in the US, the regulated utilities, is set up to manage very linear growth. What we have today is something that the industry itself is just not set up for. For example, even if you want equipment, you have to put down huge amounts of dollars to reserve those slots. You have to get approval from the PUC first before you can actually go ahead with a project. So these little bitty things that exist are huge bottlenecks to us building out the infrastructure. So we're going to have to see some changes on the policy side in order to break those down. We also have issues like credit support. Credit is a huge issue when you're building in a single site. Imagine a gigawatt is roughly, say, 3 billion of power, 15 billion of powered shell, $43 billion of GPUs. You're talking about 60-something billion dollars in 1,000 acres. How do you ensure this? There are an enormous amount of bottlenecks that exist to growing at the pace we need to grow in the US. And first, we need to be able to have the ability to build and sell directly to data centers. Ohio is a state that passed this law a few months ago, that allows you to do this, and this is why we're seeing such large-scale build happening in Ohio. We have the demand side of AI loads is unlike anything we've ever seen before. We have huge variance on this, and it causes all sorts of issues on the grid unless we design a purpose-built system to actually drive the electrons to these AI data centers, these AI factories. And so capital formation is going to actually happen, but we have to see some changes in order to allow that to actually take place. I think that this is an area very ripe for innovation across the entire power stack. We're going to use these AI factories to drive middle-class jobs across, Dr. Sultan mentioned electricians. If you've been to the Crusoe site where you have 3,000, soon to be 5,000 people pulling electricians from, 34 states?
Mm-hmm. It's 28 states.
28 states.
Yeah.
This has the power to drive an enormous amount of reindustrialization in the US, driven by the digital infrastructure, but will proliferate across the rest of the country. But we have to change some of the regulations that exist in order for us to do that. Private capital will flow into this area, as we've seen from earlier comments, but we have to do a few bottlenecks. We have to break through those in order to allow that to actually happen.
Well, before we deep dive some of those regulatory changes and actions that we can take, I want to go to Your Excellency, Mariam. When I think about the relationship between the US and UAE, it's robust and vibrant, but I also think about our UAE partners having done this forum so many years in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, about the international nature that you're thinking about, that you're bringing investment to the United States, that you're investing in Australian companies. And so, contextualize some of the challenges that we're discussing here with that framing. Compare the international trends with the US trends for us.
Thank you so much. First of all, great to be here with Chase, Chris, and CJ. Thank you so much, Fred, Dr. Sultan, for convening us. So, Landon, when I think of creating these kind of AI clusters, and this is when you look about global partnerships and going cross borders, there's certain elements that regions have to combine. That is strategic investment in AI infrastructure. It is ensuring that that region has abundant energy resources. And also, you're looking at nations that have robust and ambitious national digital agendas. When you take those, it's basically your components as in political will, land, water, energy, of course, and then looking at things like how agile are the regulatory frameworks, how's the connectivity, how's the access to labor, talent, and also looking at unlocking capital. And so when you look at our country, I think if you look at all those ingredients, we tick the boxes everywhere. And that's why we're so happy with the partnership with the US, Microsoft injecting $1.5 billion in G42, our AI powerhouse, and now with the recent visit of President Trump to the UAE, announcing the AI cluster. And if you think about what that is, this is a 5 gigawatt or up to 5 gigawatt of AI-optimized data center power. And the first phase is going to be online in 2026. And if you just think of what that's going to do to take this transformation that we need, and as Dr. Sultan mentioned, for this mega transition, we need a transformation in the energy side as well. And what the UAE has done over the years, I mean, we have the Al Noor Abu Dhabi solar park at 1.2 gigawatts. We have the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum solar power at 3.6 gigawatts. We have the nuclear power plant Baraka at 5.6 gigawatts. So when you think about what we've built over the years and the partnerships that we have built, we have, again, built the bridges, built the right ingredients to help with this transformation. And we're extremely excited with this partnership because for us, again, to move the needle on any transformation when it comes to AI, to make AI a strategic utility, something like the internet, we need these partnerships and we need the ingredients that I mentioned.
When we look at AI in the context of the US and UAE, all of that really makes sense to me. And I want to talk about pace, though, in terms of why do we have to have urgency around this? And you talked about a lot of the framing in terms of how there can be timeliness in getting these done by 2026. But Chris, if I could go back to you and think about, is there a need for competition? Is there a competitive urgency to this? And if so, why? This is ultimately a geopolitical forum. And as I think about it in conversations we've had, particularly between the US and China, what is propelling this sense of urgency and why do we have to act quickly?
Yeah, Landon, great question. Let me begin by, this is a really smart crowd, so I want to maybe do a quick pop quiz, if I could, which is how many folks in this room have read a book that came out mid to late 90s called Guns, Germs, and Steel? Let's see a raising of hands. Okay, I sort of raised my hand halfway. It was a very thick book. So I will not acknowledge whether I actually finished the entire book. But the conceit of the book was this idea that countries that are able to harness their natural or national resources, are countries that get a competitive technological advantage, and then that plays out in geopolitics. And as we sit here today in this moment, regardless of your particular perspective, at the end of the day, there's really two countries that can build AI out at scale, and that is the United States and the People's Republic of China. And as we're here at the Atlantic Council. I think of, I sometimes play a technologist on television, but I was a history major in college, so I sort of go to history and references. But I think of something like Bretton Woods. 1944 sort of creates a framework for capitalism, pushing democracy, creating the financial pipes for the world. I think we're in a similar moment right now in terms of the pipes and pathways around AI. We've talked about that this is ultimately a productivity opportunity driving technology. And which of those two countries are going to end up building the pipes for this intelligence age. Because whichever one does is going to end up really informing the values of how AI looks going forward. And so we really think about this, in terms of small d democratic AI versus autocratic AI. And when I say democratic AI, that's really ultimately getting at the idea that you're putting this technology in people's hands, in governments' hands, in nations' hands to be able to drive that economic productivity and opportunity. And what stands behind that, right? That is a teacher using this to help educate a kid, so that kid will have more opportunities. That's a government worker saving time and doing a better job of actually serving their constituents. That's the national labs here in the United States using our technology to do research that would have taken 6 months or a year down to a couple weeks, if not days. And so, we do believe as we move forward that it's incredibly important that the U.S. be playing a significant role in trying to help support the building out of small d democratic AI. And we've done two things, really specific to that. The first is a project here in the U.S. This overlaps with Crusoe, which is a $500 billion project called Stargate, which is to ensure that our country has enough AI to make sure that we're creating that access, both economic competitiveness and national security perspective. But then also something called OpenAI for Countries, which is an effort to work with different countries around the world. Could not be more excited than the announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago. We have friends here in the room who helped make it happen with the UAE, where, as you noted, Her Excellency, 200 megawatts coming on within the next year. Ultimately, the overall project is 5 gigawatts. We're going to hopefully do 1 gigawatt within that. But what that technology is going to do, and you all are thinking about this, help the transportation industry, healthcare industry, education industry, right? It is that nation-building technology and really help position country as we go forward. And I do think we need to, as a country, the United States needs to start thinking about that as a geopolitical holistic strategy.
I'm going to come to both Chase and then Her Excellency here on the same topic, which is, Chase, you prescribed to this idea that there's an urgency, an economic imperative, a security imperative, governance imperative that the United States needs to win. You've already articulated the challenges that we're having in terms of building out the infrastructure, that we need to have greater urgency there. What do we do about it, and what happens if we lag in deployment?
Yeah, so I think what's so special about this moment in time is that just the span across the economy of this effort required to achieve our goals, right? So we have researchers at OpenAI that are working on cutting-edge modeling techniques, but it spans so much deeper than that, right? From the blue-collar labor force, the electricians, the plumbers, the mechanics, the truck drivers, the construction workers that are making this happen. As CJ mentioned earlier, we have over 3,000 workers on site in Abilene, Texas, building this 1.2 gigawatt AI factory for OpenAI. We're working 200,000 man hours per week just on that site per week. So a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears is pouring into making this a reality. Beyond that, you have the whole silicon supply chain, like EUVs and our partners at NVIDIA, and all of the incredible technology going into that, and continuing to push humanity forward across the entire silicon stack. You have the entire energy stack, right? Building new power plants. The U.S. has gotten into such a stagnant moment in terms of, as so many things got more efficient, we're sort of seeing the first really big acceleration of demand on the energy sector, which is we're having to dust off the old playbooks of sort of how do we actually scale the energy infrastructure needed to meet society's demands. So it really is a team effort. It's across the board. It's every aspect of the economy that this is going to be impacting on sort of providing the infrastructure to make it happen. And then every aspect of the economy is going to benefit because we're going to have intelligence embedded in everything. And it's going to drive massive efficiencies across the economy. And I'm very much in favor of this more Western democratic approach to AI that's going to influence the future of humanity. So, you know, we the one thing I'll touch on just real quick though is sort of all of this requires capital, right? So when you look at, you know, what we're doing in Abilene, you know, we announced a $15 billion, you know, project capital that we put together, you know, with private capital resources in partnership with Blue Owl, JP Morgan, Bank of America, a number of other syndicate banks that help support that. But you know, when you have this really interesting moment in time where you know, OpenAI is sort of helping lead humanity forward and sort of the world forward in AI, and yet it's a privately held company that doesn't like have an investment grade credit rating, right? And so how do we actually think about funding the capital needs and getting the capital support? I think it's going to require the support of governments. It's going to require support of a lot of different agencies and private capital resources to actually fund the capital investments needed that are needed for this big infrastructure build out, because these are decades-long infrastructure that's needed to support, you know, this future era of intelligence. And you know, I think it's a very interesting opportunity for this public-private partnership.
Your Excellency, these gentlemen just articulated a competitive environment. I mean, you don't think about this in the context of U.S.-China if this isn't about competition and winning. And this puts UAE squarely in the middle of some of these conversations. You talked about the successful visit by President Trump to Abu Dhabi. How are you balancing these partnerships, and how do you see the AI race playing out when you have to discuss the impact of chips and access to some of these technologies to be both a leader here as you invest in the United States, but also a leader back at home?
So we've clearly made it clear to everyone that we're partnering with the US on this AI era and this AI transformation that we're going into, and that we really need to hyperscale everything around it. This is an ecosystem approach. And if you look back home, I mean, 2.0, the company that I'm heading, is really about being an AI enabler. So we are in the cable manufacturing, much like what you're doing, Chase, here in the US. So cable manufacturing, transformers. The beauty about 2.0 is that we're across the supply chain, and everything from mining, critical metals and minerals, all the way up to power generation. So being a global investment platform headquartered in Abu Dhabi, we're working globally. Now, when you look at the partnerships that we've built, and particularly now with the US, the whole idea again is scale. And it's so important to understand that time is not on our side. We need to scale, and we need to scale fast. And this is why Dr. Sultan, for example, and Fred have convened everybody here. We had the INACT yesterday. This is about discussing where are the bottlenecks so that we can basically unlock them, get capital flowing into hyperscaling energy so that we can hyperscale AI. Private sector, public sector, consumers all have a role to play. Again, the essence of time and urgency is really critical here. It's so important that we work together to ensure that we're building AI to standards that are important for humanity. And this is why we're always emphasizing partnership. And of course, the AI cluster in the UAE, and we've got partners such as OpenAI, NVIDIA, Oracle, Cisco, SoftBank. I mean, just think about the essence of everybody convening to really do good for humanity. And that's why we keep emphasizing these partnerships and keep saying we need to talk and we need to action quickly.
Is it safe to say then that the UAE is going to build those standards and those partnerships with the United States? And do you feel that that is at tension with other global opportunities, or is there a balance there?
We are, and the whole idea is bringing everyone to the room and discussing it together.
Right.
So this is going to be
More dialogues,
again,
more enact.
Dialogues and more enact. And of course, again, I emphasize the essence of time as well. It's really important that hopefully in the next enact, there will be clear indications of things that have happened. I mean, I'm feeling just from yesterday, just sitting with the folks here, There's a lot of regulatory bottlenecks here in the US. And the UAE is coming in and saying, we want to partner with you. We want to scale everything up. But of course, there's certain things that have to be unlocked here first so that we can quickly go at scale. But of course, we're coming in to make sure that you also know that you've got a partner in the UAE to say, we're here to support you in this journey.
Let's pivot to that in action. And CJ, for you, how do we turn technology imperatives into progress? You know, what mix of private sector innovation and nimble policy do we need? I don't want us just to identify a problem and talk about the urgency. I want us to really think about solutions, and I'd love your insights on that.
Sure. I think what we're all hearing here is the age of intelligence is incredibly resource intensive. And this resource intensity is where we're seeing the bottlenecks. Bottlenecks exist in turbines, transformers, switches, permitting, and regulatory bottlenecks like the inability in most states to be able to co-locate power plants with and sell to multiple data centers. That's a very simple fix that we need to be able to do, which is to be able to do large scale behind the meter in a very short period of time. We need major air permits in 3 to 6 months in the states in which we want to build, and be able to sell to multiple data centers so we can have a very efficient microgrid. The microgrid and co-located data centers is an imperative in order to build at this size, scale, and speed. And so we need to do that in each of the states in which customer demand actually exists. On the financing bottleneck, there are some very innovative solutions that we're seeing, but we ultimately are going to need some sort of credit support for some of these mega centers. If you're talking about building a 4 to 5 gigawatt data center, you're talking about $250 to $300 billion in a single location. Like I was talking about earlier, things like insurance are going to be bottlenecks, but they're also going to be bottlenecks on equipment, on people, and energy infrastructure in order to deliver what we need to a specific location. So I think that like, if we step back and think about just resource intensity, I remember when I visited Stargate, I asked them how much copper they're going to use, and it was like 250,000 tons at Stargate in Abilene. And that's the first gigawatt site. I think what we're all talking about today is multiple multi-gigawatt sites. Like, how are we going to actually build this when we have so many different material constraints? So I think, this administration has shown very adept at problem solving some of these, and so I think we're seeing some, and we have some really talented people like Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum in the administration who have solved problems of this size, of this complexity. I guess no one's ever solved anything of this size before, but this sort of complexity, who fundamentally understand that energy, power, and processing is compute, and compute is the foundation of this intelligence. And so we also have some very unique problems associated with what Chase said, which is OpenAI has dominant market share, and they are not a credit that you can project finance. Now, that's just the project finance market in the U.S. has completely disappeared and is dominated by European and Japanese banks, because we haven't built in this country at this size and scale in decades, really since the end of World War II. And so we have to dust off a very old playbook, and then that playbook is then moved to done on steroids. So there are a lot of people who are focused on solving components of this, but if we step back system-wide, we have to realize that we're going to have to take an entirely incredibly aggressive approach to be able to meet the demand that exists. I think right now OpenAI they're compute constrained. We see this every day now.
It clearly requires a comprehensive solution set. And as we conclude this, I see the clock is ticking out of time here. There is going to be a report from the Enact conversation yesterday coming out with some solutions. But I'd ask you, if you had one solution that you could push through right now, would it be behind the meter?
It would be the ability to sell build a power plant behind the meter and build a private microgrid that does not need have to go through regulatory approval with each of the PUCs.
Chris?
I'm going to take it up a level. It is a mindset. You were doing a little bit of the history lesson. By the way, every time I spend time with CJ, I learn things. He gave me a whole tutorial once on nickel and where nickel is sourced from. But look, you were touching on the history of this country. I'll try to be brief, but I'll tell a quick little story if I could, which is late 1800s. I know we're short on time. England develops the combustion engine, first cars. They pass a law called the Red Flag Law. Right? Red Flag Law basically required that there had to be 2 people in the car, right, in case something happened with the car, and someone walking out front with a red flag that pulled the car over so that the horses could continue to go past the car. Right? You move forward 20 years, the United States, Detroit, takes the combustion engine, works with the federal government, state government, private sector, stands up the U.S. auto industry. A straight through line from there to the arsenal of democracy, 20th century becoming the American century. This country is at its best when it thinks big, acts big, and builds big. And we need to get back to that. You go to Abilene, 3,500 people working on that, hard hats, sometimes scaling up to 5,000. It's horizon to horizon. It is mind-boggling to see. This country can do that. The UAE is thinking about it this way and moving in that direction. Like, it's really a mindset. Do we have the ethos to get back to building big? If we do, we can do it.
All right, Chase, we got to go quick.
For me, it's the financial side of this. I think there's 2 major opportunities, which is one, the credit support to help. I think the private sector is really good at moving quickly and building quickly. Like, we know how to do these things. We know the goal. We can do it. We have the technology. We have the people. We have the ambition. We even have the capital, but we just need the credit support on the offtake. And then the other piece is the insurance. Like, we're insuring these projects that, I mean, when we put a shovel on the ground in Abilene, there was never a data center in Abilene. We created a gigawatt scale data center market in Abilene. Going to the global insurance market and saying, hey, we need full replacement cost on, this tens of billions of dollars of invested capital here. There just wasn't necessarily an insurance market for that. So we had to think creatively about doing it on this first project. But I think there's a major opportunity for public-private partnership just on the backstop, not even on the actually asking for handouts of capital. It's just in the tail risk scenarios.
So, Your Excellency, Mariam, we have streamlined policy and ethos and financial capital flows. What's in your 100-day plan?
Urgency. So think big, think fast, and we need to do this together.
Well, I thank each of you, and I would ask the audience to join me in thanking them for these insights on such a critical issue.
Thank you so much.
Okay.